The prison walls are gone. The doors are wide open. The walls of your mind are an illusion. They were never there. We thought they were there. So the thought, the idea that we're restricted or limited in any way is now over. 2012. You are now free to roam the planet, to create whatever you wish. When Europeans first went to Australia, they could allow their cattle to roam freely because it was this huge continent and there was no other Europeans there, no other cattle. But eventually, as more and more Europeans came, there was more and more cattle. They needed to separate the cattle because they were getting mixed up. So they built fences. However, the cattle were used to roaming free for many, many years. And so they would just simply stampede and crash down and destroy these fences. Every time they tried to build a fence, the cattle would crash the fence. And about the same time, in Europe, someone developed the electric fence. And so a very astute Australian rancher electrified his fence around his cattle. And the cattle went and touched the fence 2, 3, 4 times, and they got this mild electric shock, which was unpleasant. And very quickly, his cattle quit going close to the fence. And obviously they didn't tear it down. They didn't smash it. They didn't even go close to the fence again. Well, that rancher discovered that on the same day, the cattle throughout Australia, for thousands of miles, quit going close to their fences, quit crashing their fences, quit stampeding and burying their fences. So somehow this experience transferred from the cattle on this one rancher's ranch to all the cattle throughout Australia. The same phenomenon occurs with elephants. This is a very popular story with teachers from India. And that is when an elephant is very, very small, they will tie the elephant up with a very small rope because it's a small elephant. And they'll put a stake in the ground, a small stake in the ground, tie a simple rope around the leg of the elephant, and tie the other end of the rope to the stake, and the elephant can't move, can't get away. Well, what happens is the elephant grows and grows, and of course grows as large as a house sometimes, and they keep the rope, the same small fragile rope, and the same stake in the ground, which of course the elephant could pull out of the ground with ease or break the rope. However, the elephants don't do that. They have gotten so used in their youth to this restriction, to this limitation of the rope, of it stopping them, that they don't test it. And so in India, they can keep the elephants tied up with very thin ropes to a very small stake for the whole life of that elephant. The same phenomenon can be seen with another popular story in India, and that's of monkeys. That the way they catch monkeys is they'll put some fruit in a jar, and the monkey will reach their hand into the jar and grab the fruit. Well, then the monkey won't let go of the fruit to get his hand out of the jar. Now he or she could do that. They could just drop the fruit and they could get their hand out, but they won't drop the fruit. So the monkeys are literally trapped in their own creation. Trapped in their own creation. Sound familiar? And this is how they catch monkeys. They come along, the monkey wants to get away when they see the human coming, but the monkey won't let go of the fruit. Won't let go. And so the monkey gets caught. Trapped in their own creation. So these are examples of morphic fields. The cattle, the elephants, the monkeys, they create a field of energy, a field of thoughts, beliefs, experience that develops its own life and continues until we break free of it, until we decide to shift from that morphic field. This video right now, I'm creating deliberately a morphic field of freedom, of liberty, of empowerment. And as we go through the video, you might start to feel and notice how you feel differently, perhaps more expanded, a little freer, a little lighter. It's a very deliberate thing that we can do, is to create a field of energy, empowerment of any nature that we wish. And the good news is that for all the restrictive morphic fields, fields of thoughts, ideas, concepts, experience that we have on our journey here as humanity on planet Earth, for all the restrictive morphic fields, there has always come along one individual or more who have said, hey, I don't enjoy this. I'm not going to go along with it. I refuse. And when one person does this, when one person breaks the sound barrier, when one person runs less than the 4-minute mile, when one person challenges and cracks through the limitations of a morphic field, that person creates a new morphic field that's more expanded, more free, with a lot more options, a lot more possibilities. The most powerful example of this in my life has been the fall of the Berlin Wall. I remember right where I was the day I took a break at lunch from a workshop I was giving in Phoenix, and I watched television because I heard there was some breaking news. And on this day was the day that the East German government gave 24-hour passes for East Germans to go through the Berlin Wall into West Germany. But it was just 24-hour passes. So when the 24 hours was up, the East Germans had to come back. And as they were coming back behind the Iron Curtain, into the Soviet Empire, into the restrictive dictatorship of East Germany, as they were coming back through the Berlin Wall, Dan Rather was there, the CBS reporter. And he decided to interview one of the East Germans that had had a day of freedom, 24 hours of freedom in West Berlin. And he was standing right there at the Brandenburg Gate, at a gate crossing, right by the Berlin Wall. And this story had particular emotional power for me because my brother and I had visited the Berlin Wall years ago. And we had gone through the Berlin Wall right at that crossing point where Dan Rather was interviewing this East German. And right at that crossing point, on the day that my brother and I, many years earlier, on the day that we went through in and out of East Germany with our US passports, freely and safely, on that same day, later in the day in the news, we heard that an East German had been shot and killed right where we had crossed, at about the same time that we had crossed the border. An East German wanting freedom, an East German wanting to live freely, had been shot and killed right at that spot. So that affected us very, very deeply. Made us very grateful for the freedom that we had and the power that we had. So here I was watching another event at the same spot, at the same crossing along the Iron Curtain. And so Dan Rather interviews this East German and said, what was it like? What was it like visiting West Berlin, West Germany, being able to say what you want and do what you want for 24 hours? And the East German said, well, it was wonderful. It was great. I just felt fantastic. It's a little sad going back, but you know, it was wonderful. And then Dan Rather asked the East German, when do you feel that the Berlin Wall will fall? And the East German said, oh, it's gone. It's gone. And Dan Rather said, a little bit condescending, a little bit patronizing, Dan Rather said, oh, no, you don't understand. When will the actual physical Berlin Wall be torn down? When will the actual wall be gone? And the East German, being as kind as he could, said to Dan Rather, no, you don't understand. The wall is gone. the wall is gone. And he at that moment created a reverberation, a vibration, an energy field, a morphic field of recognition, of empowerment, of freedom that spread. It's still spreading throughout the planet, but it spread very fast to his own country people. And they all started crossing. Within a few days, the East Germans were crossing over into West Germany freely. The physical wall was not torn down till a little bit later, but in effect, that morphic field of restriction, of limitation, was gone. The wall was gone, in effect. And that morphic field of freedom, of taking your power back, also spread by what we call morphic resonance, or the vibration and the energy of it through consciousness, spread to the people behind the Iron Curtain in Czechoslovakia and Hungary and other of the Soviet states. And people started crossing in those countries as well, walking right past the guards with guns. And that was the end of the Iron Curtain. Not just the Berlin Wall, but the whole Iron Curtain. This is a very powerful concept, a very powerful phenomenon. Another time it showed up was with Rosa Parks in 1955. Rosa Parks was coming home from work in Birmingham, Alabama, and she refused to give up her seat in the black section of the bus to a white passenger. She just simply refused, and she was arrested. But that refusal, that decision of hers, and as she said later, to quote her, she said, "I'd had enough. I wasn't going to take it anymore." When she took back her power from that idea of limitation, she created a new morphic field of freedom. And there was a bus boycott, and then eventually that led to a huge wave of freedom that eventually led to the Civil Rights Act and the end of segregation in the South and in America. Another example is the Stonewall riots in 1969 in New York City. Stonewall was a bar in New York, and at one point, for whatever reason, that evening, the patrons of this bar had had enough of police harassment, where the police would come in and arrest everybody in the bar for no reason other than that they were gay. It was a gay bar. And at that moment, their awareness, their empowerment had gotten great enough that they simply refused. And they used that word again. They said, "We refuse to go along with this old idea that we could be imprisoned and arrested for simply being gay." And that was the beginning of the gay rights movement, and that civil rights movement that today is still growing. They planted that seed. Another powerful seed that was planted by one person was Gandhi. One person deciding to not go along with, that refused to go along with the British dictatorship, the British rule of India, liberated his whole people. He took on the greatest empire that ever ruled the planet, one person and one, because of the power of choosing freedom, refusing to go along with an old idea, a limiting belief. And that spread throughout his country. We can do this with any limitation. We have the ability and the power to do this at any time, with anywhere where we're feeling restricted, limited by a feeling, a thought, a belief, any morphic field, any past experience. We can say no to the mind. We can say no to the wall that we feel, the limitation that we feel. Before I learned the techniques that I teach now, I knew this truth somewhere deep in my gut. And I was also desperate. And I didn't enjoy having myself limited all the time by my feelings and my guilt and my idea that I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that, and my fears. And what I would do in my house was I noticed that over the years, every time I started to feel really happy, or every time that life started to go really well with me, whether it was a relationship or with my career or artistic expression, or with my health, anytime I started to feel really good in any part of my life, all of a sudden this dark cloud would come, and this feeling of dread and low self-worth and guilt, and that I'd done something wrong, this feeling got in the way. And at one moment I had it, just like Rosa Parks, just like Gandhi, just like those gay people in the bar, just like the people in East Germany behind the Iron Curtain. I had it. I had had enough. And I said, I refuse. And I used to scream at my mind and say, you are not robbing me of this joy one more time. I have had enough. I am no longer going to allow you to steal my joy. And I would repeat this little rant every time I started feeling that I was sinking into submission to my feelings, to limitation, losing my power, losing my fun, losing my joy, losing this good opening in my life. I would rant and rave and say no until I would shift, and I would shift, and then I would take back my land, take back my power, take back my territory. Now I have some easier ways to do it. You can check out my free videos on YouTube. They're mostly called the quick shift, and the quick shift are ways, techniques that you can take back your power from these walls, from these boundaries, these borders, these feelings of limitation, restriction. They're only feelings. I had one teacher that this really helped me, and he used to say, the past only exists to the degree that we drag it into the present. The past only exists to the degree that we drag it into the present. The past are memories. The past is beliefs. The past are morphic fields that used to be so. And if we don't bring them into the present moment, by giving them our attention now, by reinforcing them, by perpetuating them, by allowing them to become real and powerful in this moment, if we don't do that, if we refuse, if we say no to the pattern, no to the mind, no to that old morphic field, it can't reassert itself. We're then free. We're then free to create what we want. You are free now. We are all free now. As Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. I have a dream. We all have that dream in our hearts, and we all know that truth in our heart. And as he ended that speech, Martin Luther King, creating another beautiful morphic field, another morphic field of freedom and empowerment, he said, free, free at last. Thank God we are free at last. I had one teacher who also said this very well. He said, how long does it take to become what we've always been? How long does it take to become what we've always been? How long does it take to become what we've never not been? How long does it take to become what we've never not been? What does it take to become free? When you're already free. When you've always been free, you're free right now, and you always will be free. What does it take? How long does it take? This is 2012. All my teachers, most of my teachers were shaman, medicine men, some teachers from India, and they all told me, 40 years ago, they all went on and told me about this time period right now of 2012. I listened, but I didn't really understand it, and I couldn't believe it was possible. But they told me that this was the time of the great revealing, that the truth would come out. And you know, the truth is that we have the power, and that we already are free. That is the truth. At one point I visited a volcano in Costa Rica, and a few months after I visited this volcano, which erupted while I was there. Had a very powerful experience, being 200 feet from an erupting volcano and surviving, obviously. About 2 months later, the spirit of that volcano visited me at my home. And the spirit of that volcano told me about this time period right now. And it said at this time period in 2012, humanity will reach a critical mass of realization, a critical mass of awareness, of empowerment. And a critical mass doesn't mean a majority of people will realize their freedom, their power. All it takes is a certain number. And when a certain number of people have awoken, when a certain number of people realize that they are free, that will spread like wildfire. That will spread like the freedom in India, like the freedom in New York City, like the freedom in the South, like the freedom behind the Iron Curtain. The vibration of freedom, the vibration of empowerment is electric. It's very, very powerful. And the spirit of the volcano said, when everyone is singing their song, dancing their dance, all of humanity will shift to the next level of self-expression and joy. So all it will take is for each of us to sing our song, dance our own dance, do our own thing, express our truth, be who we are. And at a certain point, enough of us will be doing that all of humanity will feel that morphic field, will feel that field of dreams, that field of freedom, expression, power, joy.